Hello everyone and welcome to another Florida Native Plant Society Lunch and Learn. Today I'm really pleased to have Marjorie Shropshire and Linda Davis here. Linda is our executive director. You can see her off to my left, and then Marjorie is in the bottom left, and then in the bottom right is Linda's iPhone over a pad of paper. So just to kind of show you how this is going to go, Marjorie is going to share her screen. So that'll pop up on the left, and then we'll be oriented on the right side of your screen. I have fancy technology where I can just switch over into this camera here that is behind me, and so that you can see what I am drawing. So keep your eye on Linda's pad and my pad if you want to watch, if you're not following along yourself, or you just want to watch us draw. So the camera is right here, pointed down there, and Linda's is just off to her right hand, as you can see. Linda?
Anyway, so really so thrilled to have Marjorie with us today. I'm going to give her formal introduction, but she's sort of better known as being a very long-term member and supporter of FNPS, and most importantly, editor of our Palmetto magazine, which I know, publication, which I know you will get and love. And so we're so grateful for her being today. She's fantastic asset to FNPS. Marjorie was born in Miami, Florida, and grew up making regular forays into the Everglades, Florida Keys, and the lower Southwest Florida coast. She enjoys exploring, botanizing, sailing, adventure travel, community science, and drawing and painting natural history topics. She's a member of the Guild of Natural Science Illustrators and leads nature drawing and field journaling workshops to teach others about how to look more deeply at nature through art practice. A lifelong artist who began painting age 6, Marjorie has a Bachelor of Fine Arts degree from the University of Miami, Coral Gables, Florida, and a Master's of Fine Arts in Design and Visual Communication from the University of Florida, Gainesville. We're super, like I said, super thrilled to have you here today. Everybody's very excited about what we're going to be learning today. So thank you so much for being with us, Marjorie. We appreciate it.
Thanks, Linda. Thanks for the nice introduction. So before I start my presentation, I'm going to just, let me share my screen here for a second. So you have something to look at besides my head. You can look at my studio back here though. So connecting with nature through field journaling, and also another aspect of this is personal well-being. So field journaling or nature journaling is really steeped in science, if we're going to look at a little bit of the history of it, but we can also use it for personal well-being to help us observe and document what's around us and help us make a better connection with the natural world. So we're going to start out by learning a little bit about the practice and how it began, and some techniques, easy techniques, because I know everybody is, or most people when I teach this, the first thing they say is, I don't know how to draw. And rest assured, you don't really need to know how to draw to do this. Basically, we want to use drawing techniques to jumpstart our engagement with what E.O. Wilson calls the little things that run the world. So you're going to be looking for some details you might have missed before, and then you can put those in your journal and share that with others. All right, so if everybody's ready, I'm going to start my presentation. So, well, all right. Okay, so humans have been documenting nature for a really long time. This is an example of a wall painting from Karnak, Egypt. And this isn't strictly nature journaling, but what's interesting about it is that there's a number of recognizable species in this left image. And you can see papyrus for one thing, and a number of birds that you probably recognize today. It actually looks pretty modern and pretty stylized. Going a little bit later, there's different use for the image on the right. This is from a book of nature. And at this point, people started using woodcuts. And the reason they're using woodcuts here is because you can make more than one copy of something. But these are printed descriptions of plants. And rather than being just simply decorative, like what a lot of people do with botanical art, this was actually for study. And so these things were early alternatives, I guess, to having the plant in your hand. So if you couldn't look at the plant with another person, you could share this image of it and learn about it in a different location than the plant was at. Later on, we get Joseph Grinnell a lot later on. So Joseph Grinnell was in the American West, and he's a really interesting guy. There's a big fat biography of him if you want to learn more about him. But basically, he documented California's plants and animals, and he standardized note taking. He wasn't the only person that was involved in this effort. So he wanted everybody that was doing this to have a system, now known as the Grinnell system. And, you know, a field notebook, a journal of observations, detailed species accounts, and a catalog of things that were seen along the way. And so he was really one of the foremost people to standardize this practice. And a lot of people still follow some of his methods, and I practice some of his methods, but only a few of them, because I'm not really collecting information for scientific research like he and his team were. Another person that used field notes for scientific study was Roland Thaxter a few years later. And he was a mycologist, plant pathologist, botanist, and entomologist. And he liked to draw, but he was also inspired by nature. And so he has this mix of aesthetics and also study. And one thing I think that's really interesting about this work, and there's a lot of it, if you go and look at the work, he's got page after page after page of fungi and mushrooms. He's not super good at rendering things. So like, you might not hang this on your wall, but you can certainly recognize the species that he has seen and documented here. And he's also taken notes along the way. So this is an example of, I'm sure he had fun drawing these because drawing is fun, right? But he also collected a lot of information about the fungi and what they were doing. And he also applied color. And that's something that was kind of interesting to me, because how do you standardize color? And we now have the Pantone system, but earlier there was a thing called the nomenclature of color, which even Charles Darwin used. And that helped people to, if you were talking about a particular color, there was a little book. And if everybody had that book, they could, you know, say, oh yes, it's this color on this page, this number. And it was a recognizable thing that could be standardized. And so that's also been reproduced, and you can get it in facsimile. And I meant to bring a copy in the studio, but it's in the other room, so I'm not going to get up and go get it. But if anybody's interested in that, maybe while Linda's drawing and Valerie's drawing, I'll run out and grab it, and we can take a look at that if you're interested. So scientific drawings today. This is Alice Tangerini. She's a staff illustrator at the botany department at the National Museum of Natural History at the Smithsonian. She has a great job. She has a great office, you know, looking over the mall. And she does all the drawings for scientific papers that come through the botany department at the Smithsonian, and probably for some other people too. But she at one time did all this work by hand with an ink pen. And as you know, we all know, the computer has sort of taken over the world. So she now has figured out a way to do this on a drawing. She has a large drawing tablet, and she's customized brushes in Photoshop to be able to simulate the same look that she got from drawing with a pen. But she's the real deal. So she, you know, produces botanically accurate images for scientific study. And she has to make sure that they're correct in terms of scale and all the morphological detail that anybody would want to look at, because if it's wrong in a scientific paper, then that's not good. So we're not really doing scientific journaling here, we're doing nature journaling, and there's a lot of different ways of working. So if you're really interested in scientific documentation, you can certainly do that, and you can focus on close observation and accurate drawing, kind of like what Alice is doing. You can have a more artistic method to it, where you're looking more just at colors and shapes and content and form. You can also just have a journal that's personal reflection. So it can record your thoughts and emotions about where you are and what you're doing. Or you can document a special place. So one of the things that I'm going to start doing pretty soon is I love scrub, Florida scrub, and I'm going to very shortly start a what's called a perpetual journal, which is where you each spread in the book, and a spread is 2 pages. So say this is not my perpetual journal, but if it were, that's a spread, 2 pages, is a week throughout the year, and you date all these in advance, and then you put 1 drawing per week on that spread starting at January 1, and the journal I've got will work for 5 years. And so after 5 years, you have 5 drawings on every spread. It could be from one site, it could be from a group of sites. In my case, it's all going to be about scrub plants, different locations around Florida. So that's going to be documenting a special place, personal documentation, but I'm also going to incorporate some of these other things. So there'll be some scientific study there. It'll be artistic because that's what I do. And it'll have personal reflections. So it's really your choice what you want to do with this. You don't have to really pick a single direction. You can pick a group of directions and combine them. Basically, it's your own place to do whatever you want. So why do we practice this? There's a guy named John Muir Laws, and if you're interested in nature journaling, I encourage you to look at his website. There's going to be a link on the last page of this presentation. And he's related to John Muir. And so he's made it his mission in life to encourage other people to get interested in nature journaling. And he's got lots of free assets on his website for learning. And they also do a conference every year, Wild Wonder, out in California, which is really cool. So a couple of quotes here from him. The goal of it's really not to create pretty pictures, but to develop a tool to help you see, wonder, and remember experiences. All right, now we all have a camera. I have several cameras. Why not just take a picture? So I think, I'm not saying that if you're journaling, you're gonna not take pictures, because I'm still taking pictures. I have 13,000 some odd pictures on my phone, and they're almost all either plants or my cat. So, but one thing to think about is Robin Wall Kimmerer, who's an indigenous botanist and writer, said today the average American can identify fewer than 10 plants, and that's really kind of sad. So I sort of equate taking pictures, literally consuming something. So you see it, you grab it, you take the picture, you walk away, and we take thousands of images, but how many of those do you really remember? Versus sketching something where you have to slow down and actually look at that. So you're going to engage with the world and what Robin Wall Kimmerer would call our non-human kin. Like these little, I guess they're milkweed bugs, right? Over in Kissimmee Prairie. So I did take a picture of the milkweed bugs. You can also practice this for well-being. And, we're all stressed out and we've got too much to go, too much going on in our lives, but this helps you to slow down and use all your senses. And it encourages you to spend more time in nature because you actually have to sit there and look at something. Put away screens, observe more closely, and then you can also practice drawing as a form of meditation. And I don't mean literally meditating, but sort of slowing your mind down and trying to focus on a single thing. So asking who else is here, what's that little bug doing, my little brother bug that's sitting there? Or you can just do it because it's fun. And when you're having fun, you have a sense of what's called flow. And when we're in that flow state, all that extraneous stuff about, oh, my dentist appointment, or whatever it is that's bugging us, that seems to go away. So it's super helpful for self-care to be able to get into the flow state. Now, this is Larry the lichen. And I asked Larry this question: what's the number one tool you need to nature journal? And Larry said hands, because he doesn't have any hands, right? But really, that's not I mean, maybe that's Larry's answer, but my answer is curiosity. The number one tool that you need is curiosity. And basically, you can have a lot of tools, and you see my studio back here. I'm a tool nut. I've got all kinds of stuff. But basically, I might just carry a minimal field kit. And my most minimal field kit is going to be what we're going to use today. So it's a pencil and some sketchbook. And we can talk a little bit later about different kinds of sketchbooks, and I can hold up a few, but a minimal toolkit will help you work on the fly in the field. Especially if you're going a long distance, weight is a consideration. So I know I don't like to schlep a lot of really heavy stuff around. So for this particular minimal field kit, I don't take any colors with me. But what I do sometimes is I write down color notes in these notebooks. If I'm going to be somewhere a little longer, I might take watercolors with me. And I have a number of different watercolor sets. These are half pan sets. Those little boxes with colors are called half pans, and you can buy the individual colors by themselves. And so what I like to do is customize these little boxes. And if I'm going to go in a particular place where I know that I'm going to need a particular palette of colors, I'll only take one little box that has just what I need. You don't need, you see these watercolor boxes that have 100 colors. You don't really need that. It's fun to have it in your studio, but you definitely don't want to be carrying that in the field. This lumpy gray thing you see up here next to the brushes, that's a kneaded eraser. And that's a really cool thing to have. I encourage you not to erase, and I'm going to ask you not to erase when we're working today, but if you're watercoloring and you wanted to make your pencil lines a little lighter, a kneaded eraser can erase without damaging your paper. And it also doesn't leave any eraser dirt, that fluff behind that most erasers leave. So lots of different kinds of sketchbooks, all different sizes. I use everything from something that's that big to sometimes if I'm really on the fly, I'll fold up a piece of paper and stick it in my pocket along with my pencil, and that's all I take. So you don't have to have any elaborate supplies to do this. Although like I said, I'm a tool nut, so I have lots of colors, and this is only a small selection of my colors because I like to experiment with pigments, and I have historic pigments, I have mineral pigments that are made of soil. I have all kinds of cool stuff to play with.
Marjorie,
and as you get,
is there an ideal size for a journal? Really
nature? There's there's three things I carry the most often. So if I'm really, if I'm going on like an FNPS field trip, so like the field trip during the Miami conference where we went out into Big Cypress, that was a rough go and the weather was horrible. I carry a little book like this. This is a little Moleskine book, and it'll actually fit in a shirt pocket. So I would take this, and I would take a mechanical pencil, because this has a lot of leads in it. You can't hear it rattle, but there's leads inside the barrel of this, and you don't have to sharpen it. So this is my minimum field kit. And this thing's probably 3 by 5 inches, like the size of an index card. That's good for just taking notes, but if you want to draw something that's a little bit bigger and it isn't too unwieldy, a sketchbook like this that's spiral bound, this is probably 5 by 8 or 6 by 9. It gives you a lot more space to draw in, and to take notes. And I work on both sides of the paper. So some people only want to work on one side, but I consider these things to be, they're not art. So, why waste the backside of the paper? The other thing that's really cool is Write in the Rain books. And so this is one that I took on the Exumas trip with me. These are waterproof. And so, being that I was going to be out, now this has lines, which I don't really like, but I believe that they also make some Write in the Rain materials that don't have lines. I don't know if the field books come without lines, but they do have some drawing books that come without lines. And this is something, if you're out and you drop it in the water, or you get rained on, this is not going to destroy your work as long as you're using a pencil. If you're using a pen and it's not a waterproof pen, then it can still get damaged if it gets wet. So those are kind of my 3 go-to sketchbooks. And then sometimes I'll do more finished work in the studio in something like this big Strathmore book. This is a lot bigger, but this is only for more finished work. If I'm going to spend a lot of time on something, like I would use something like this. Or if I'm going to a place where I'm only going to be in one spot. So for instance, if I was going to go out to Jonathan Dickinson State Park and I knew a certain place where, say there was an orchid that I wanted to spend a lot of time drawing or painting, and it wasn't so far away that it was going to be a problem to, carry stuff into, I would take a larger book like this and a watercolor set. All right, so here's Larry again. Larry keeps, he keeps bugging me, asking me questions, but I can't draw. Everybody says that, but you can. And so I mentioned my Exuma field notes before, and this was a FNPS trip from, I think, 2012. It was a fabulous international field trip. And it was basically all spent hiking around on these heavily vegetated islands, like that picture in the upper left corner of me. And you'll notice I've got my Write in the Rain book right there. I got my pencil. I got my camera and water. And beyond that, there's really not much else I wanted to carry because, we went out in the morning and we were gone all day. So these examples are sketches from that particular field book. And you'll see some plant names. I didn't always know the Latin names of everything, so I would put down what I realized, what I knew, and then later on, I would go back and try to fill in some of the blanks when we got back on the boat as far as some of the scientific names. But, making some notes, not just about plants, but other things seen along the way. And, there's an example there on the right-hand page of sort of a elevation gradient with a few things growing on it. I thought was interesting. Things that I saw that I wasn't sure what they were, you can sketch those and then try to figure them out later. And then the page on the left was more about some of the different rock formations on a couple of the islands that we visited that were really unique. Antarctica trip, same thing. So I did take watercolors, but you can't really watercolor outside unless you're willing to, I guess, paint with alcohol. You could probably do it. So this is an example in that lower right. I had some color pencils. So color pencils you can carry into the field. You can, not this many, but I probably took 4 or 5. But I also made color notes on this because I didn't feel like the color pencils really captured what I was seeing there. And so sometimes I would make the sketches, and the example in the lower left, brown, black rock. I didn't have access to a camera to look at. Like, I went on this trip before there were digital cameras. And so basically the minute that I got off the Zodiac and got back onto the ship, and got my stinky penguin poop boots off, I would grab my colors and try to, from memory and from looking out the porthole, try to get some of those colors down right away before I forgot. And so I basically used these sketchbooks and the information I collected in them to do some paintings when I got back that are, full-blown oil paintings of some of what I saw on this Antarctic trip. Close-up. Now that's a close-up of one of these little books. I take this, if I'm canoeing or kayaking, I'll take a little book like this, canoeing or kayaking, because I can do something in it real fast. And you can see, I'm not really trying to make a piece of art. There's no time to put in all the details. And so you just kind of have to capture what you can. And then later on, it helps to have a good memory. Later on you can go back and maybe fill in some things that you didn't, or you can draw one of something. So for example, in the foreground here, if say this tree that's on the right-hand page, if I had bothered to detail that, all those other trees of the same species in the background, I don't really need to draw all those in. All right, so Yogi Berra, everybody's heard this quote, you can observe a lot by watching. But our brains are basically lazy, and so they will trick you sometimes into drawing what you think you see. So visual observation is really the first step to being able to draw something. And a lot of the time before I start, I'll take some time and really look at whatever I'm doing, and then look closer, because you're going to see, at first, you're not going to see all the details. And sometimes it helps to say things out loud, or I talk to myself in the field. What am I looking at here? And how many petals does this have? And what's this little structure going on? Questioning is really important to the process of observing. Other ways of seeing, besides with your eyes, what's it feel like? Do you have some emotional connection to this thing? And I know for some of you that's going to get a little bit wah-wah, but touching something and smelling something can also, drawing is, it's a tactile endeavor. And if you're doing something tactile and you touch what you're drawing, you might be able to add a little bit more to the drawing that communicates something to another person who's looking at it and can't see what you were drawing. So by touching and smelling, you're taking in more information that you can incorporate into what you're doing, because the drawing is what you're seeing filtered through you as a living being. And like I said, ask yourself questions, how do parts that you're looking at relate to one another, and just try to focus on stuff. When I teach color, I always ask people, what color are trees? And people say, trees are green. Trees are green and the sky is blue. And, we all know that's not true. I'm sure everybody in the Native Plant Society looks at enough plants to realize that there's a million shades of green out there. But that's important too, if you are dealing with color, to realize that there's this huge palette of different colors in our world. And sometimes it's easy to overlook this if we're just kind of, steaming along through the scrub or whatever. But I mean, look at that left-hand photo with that beautiful silver saw palmetto. And then there's a scrub oak in the foreground, and they're just radically different in color. And I find that's a way to make your work a lot more visually exciting too. I mean, it's instead of everything just being kind of the same Kelly green or lime green, whatever. And look for differences. I think everybody here is aware that these are not the same species of flower, but when I show this to people who are not plant people, they just think daisy, and they don't really realize that these are two completely different species, even though they look nothing alike. Have intentional curiosity, so trying to figure out what's really going on in here. And in those circles, I'm not going to go through these, but there's some, well, I will go through them because I think some people are on their phones and maybe they can't see this in detail, but if you're trying to figure out what's going on with something you're looking at, observing, questioning, and reflecting on it before you draw is helpful. And then drawing it helps you learn more about it. And meditating on the practice and process of drawing helps you get a deeper understanding of what you're looking at. And also, if you're into, the gratitude and self-care, you can gain some of that as well. This page it's probably hard to see, but this has some prompts on it. And it's basically some things you can use to jumpstart your work. There's a link here where you can download this and print it out. And it's actually, I keep one folded up in one of my notebooks, but it's this Australian artist, Paula Peters, but it's really based on some things John Muir Laws is promoting, and adding writing to your journal pages. And the things that you want to consider when you're adding writing to them are these questions. I notice, what have I noticed when I'm out in the field? I wonder why that flower structure in the middle is the way it is. It reminds me of something else, just like when you're trying to remember somebody's name and you can't, because if you can associate that with something, you can remember it. and it makes me feel. And that's that self-reflection part of what you're doing. And it's, I think, really important, and helps you become more engaged with what you're drawing and with nature in general. Okay, so now we're gonna draw stuff. And I hope everybody has a pencil. And I've just got a regular, I got a regular pencil here, just like, number 2 pencil. And I'm just going to use some typewriter paper on this clipboard, but you can use anything that you've got. And so Linda and Valerie are going to draw along, and you'll be able to see them do this while I talk. And you're not going to see me draw because I didn't have the right setup to be able to do this. So Linda's going to help us out here. And the other thing that you should have is some kind of an object. And I have this ginormous pine cone, but anything, you can have a flower, you can have a leaf, you can have a shell. You could probably use anything around you, but it'd be fun if you have something that's from nature. All right, so our first drawing exercise is what's called blind and modified contour drawing. And if you've ever taken an art class, this is one of the first things that you'll do. And I know when I first encountered this in college, it freaked me out, because the process involves looking at what you're drawing and not looking at the drawing that you're doing. And that's tough. But it's about a few things that will help you be better at drawing. And one of them is warming up. Just like if you're exercising, you want to get a little stretching and warm up. Letting go is really important. Not having these, like tensions involved in, oh my gosh, I don't know how to draw, but I have to draw this thing. And the number one for me is forgetting perfection, because you cannot get perfection in this exercise. And in general, why do we care about perfection anyway? I mean, that's perfectionism is something that somebody outside of us applies to us and, kind of forces on us. And I'm all about letting that be someplace else. The other thing the exercise will help is getting rid of negative thoughts and embracing the difference between what, you think you're going to do and what you actually do, and realizing that it's valuable. So this practice is valuable. It's going to help you see something in a different way. And that's okay. And it's a good thing. The other thing it's going to help you do is eye-hand coordination. Eyes, brain, and hand have to be connected together. And this, as a warm-up exercise, is great. And also just exploring what you're drawing and exploring the drawing process, and maybe sparking a new idea. So if I take my pine cone and I were to sit here and take my paper and I'm like, a death grip on the pencil, and I'm, trying to delineate every little tiny thing on this. I mean, I might, if I was good enough, I might be able to make a drawing that looks exactly like this pine cone. It might look just like a photo, but is that really what we want to do? I mean, wouldn't it be better to react to this somehow and have it speak to the viewer a little bit? So exploring and trying to spark a new way of looking at stuff is another thing that this helps do. And the final thing, and this is sort of an art thing, but there's an artist, Paul Klee, Klee, and you can look him up online. He's very cool. And somebody, he probably in a class, he had to say, what is drawing? And he said, drawing is taking a line for a walk. So when you're drawing, think about, you've got your dog on a leash and you're taking your line for a walk through this, space. All right. So Linda, are you ready to go?
I am. Yes.
All right. So here's the process. You are going to take your object and you're going to hold it up where you can see it. And then you're going to take your pencil. You're going to put your pencil down on the point of the paper where you want to start. And you're going to sort of describe the shapes you see, but you're not going to take your eyes off the object. So cheating involves looking at your paper. So keep your eyes on the object, draw as much detail as you can. Don't look at your paper.
Okay.
Don't take your pencil off the paper.
Okay. So a continuous
line.
Okay. And this is, hang on a sec, I have to take a minute because it's really hard not to look at the paper in your hands. And to,
well, you know what? One thing that helps is I've got this little side table over here. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to put my drawing pad over on the side table where it's over here.
Well, luckily mine is over to one side because it's where the other camera is. So it is over to one side. Okay. So, and then I'm going to try not to make funny facial expressions while I concentrate.
No, it's okay.
And also don't have reading glasses on. So, okay, let me have a go. And if everybody else is having a go too at just attempting this, I did have a little try yesterday and it's hard to let go, to just, see, I haven't even started and I looked at my paper. Right.
Marjorie, how long, since I'm already stressed out, how long are we doing this particular exercise?
Well, let's do this for about, let's give it 5 minutes for the first one, because I think we're going to do more than one on the same piece of paper, because it's good to repeat this, and it's actually really cool if the drawings overlap one another, because you get some really interesting things. Valerie, do I need to stop screen sharing? All right, is that, you want me to do that? And then we'll come back to this.
So I'm going to say, if I'm going to try and speak and do this at the same time, because it's literally, so that one of the hard things is not taking my pencil off the paper. Like it's just tempting to do that. And I guess it's helpful not to, because otherwise I'm going to lose complete perspective. But as I'm not looking, I might have lost complete perspective anyway.
It's okay. So for example, if you took your pencil off the paper, then just don't look, just put it back down someplace where you think you were, and just keep going from where you thought you were at.
And now I'm also thinking I really should have chosen something more simple. I had a sea grape leaf there. That's just a big circle. That would have been a great starting point. This little pine cone has a lot of detail.
Yeah, I know. I'm drawing this pine cone too, but you know, one thing that's really cool about the pine cone is that it gives you a lot of opportunities to look at the negative space. So negative space is the open space in between the pieces of something that you're drawing. So if you're drawing, say that you have a branch from some kind of a plant, and it's got a stem and 5 or 6 leaves on it, the spaces in between that are just as important as the actual thing that you're drawing. And so I have a friend who teaches drawing at the college level, and she actually teaches, and we're not going to do this today, but you can, instead of drawing the object itself, you can draw the spaces in between the object pieces. And that's another really interesting kind of way to approach something. And she does pretty much what we're doing right now in this exercise, but as finished work. And she likes to draw architecture. And so it's amazing the amount of detail and accuracy that you can get with this once you kind of get used to the process.
So I've gotten pretty much to the bottom of my cone, and I've realized, you mentioned the death grip. I think that's my what I've been doing. You can see my hands are like, oh my goodness, I went off on a complete squiggly line.
Look at that. Valerie, is that yours? So I think Valerie, she made, I mean, to me, that's, if the flower wasn't there, I still think I could kind of recognize what that, I think I could almost recognize what flower that is. So try again, Valerie.
Cone is a little bit less. So I think I was too too tightly gripped. Is there a different way to relax my hand to try this in a different way?
Well, one thing that you can do, and I just took my pencil off off my paper.
Oh no.
But you know, we're taught in school when we're taught to write. How many of you are old enough to have been trained to write in cursive by going like this in the air? All right, so you're supposed to hold your pencil like this, and that sort of lets you grab onto it really tight. But a lot of people, when they draw, they hold their pencil like this. And if you hold your pencil like that, it frees your arm up a little bit, and it's harder to grab onto it. So if you're having trouble with this sort of death grip thing, try that and see if that works. It's also a little bit harder to control. So it might, on a small piece of paper, it might add another, another thing you have to deal with to this. Whoa. Okay, I actually got something I think is pretty interesting, and but I'm going to start again because I took my pencil off the page. Wow, now look at that. How similar do those look?
More loosey-loose. Okay, I'm gonna do it again. Is it okay if I do it again?
Absolutely.
I'm doing mine again.
Oh, people are already posting theirs in the Facebook group.
Oh, fantastic. Oh. We were going to suggest that, so that's great. Or you may have already done it. Oh, see, mine are both going to the right-hand side. I mean, I'm consistent, just weird. I feel like we should have some sort of like jazz music playing in the background. Yeah, because I think I'm trying to.
Yeah, I mean, that's fine. A lot of the time, you know, we'll put music on in the classroom. And it helps people zone out a little bit. So one of the things that's really cool about putting more than one of these drawings on the page is the overlaps that you'll get, because you don't really know where you're at. And that can be, it can really be an interesting and beautiful way to work.
Okay, you guys can't hear the music, Linda and Marjorie,
No.
but I put it for everybody else. So if you're in the YouTube video and you find the music distracting, just tell me to turn it off. Thank you.
Oh, see, that time I actually concentrated and it's getting to look more like a pine cone. I wasn't chatting so much.
The other thing is you don't have to draw the whole thing. So I try to draw the whole thing, and then I decided I wanted to concentrate on a couple of little details. So you can make more than one drawing on your paper and focus on different parts of this also.
So Marjorie, I'm imagining you're going to hold up yours and it's going to be a perfectly finished.
Oh no. Valerie, how much time do we have?
We did 5 minutes already.
Okay. Do we want to stop?
I think so.
Yeah.
All right. So I'll show you what I did. Can everybody see that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what's interesting about that is I'm drawing this thing, but because I sort of lost track of where I was at here, I went down one side, and when I tried to draw up the other side, it sort of gave me an exploded feeling to this, which I think is kind of interesting. And then same thing happened when I tried to draw the bottom, the spiral on the bottom of this. What happened is I actually got an unwinding spiral. So
yeah. Just like the...
Yeah, and so I look like what I was trying to do, but it made me think more about this, the unwinding spiral. So how did this form? What kind of relationships does this spiral have to other things in nature that are spirals, like a galaxy, right? Looks kind of like a spiral galaxy. So this process can spark a lot of different ideas just by taking something as simple as a leaf or a pine cone.
Fantastic, thank you.
We ready to go on to something else, or?
Yeah.
All right. Okay, so I'm going to go back to my screen share, and we're going to go to the next. So that's blind and modified contour. That's actually blind contour. Modified contour is the same process, but every now and then you can look at your paper. All right, so the next thing we're going to try, and this is 5, 10, and 15 seconds. Valerie's going to time us. We're going to start with 5-second drawings. You can do, I don't know, let's say we'll do 3 of these. What we're going to practice here is, again, it's a warming up and letting go exercise. This is really good for making a quick impression of something. It's good practice if you're trying to get used to doing fast observation and getting down what you see. So if you're interested in drawing birds, I spent a lot of time in my young career painting bird paintings, life-size bird paintings, and selling them. And it was always tough to be out in the field and, trying to draw a bird, and you would draw its beak or its foot or whatever, and then it would be gone, and then it wouldn't come back. So this is great for anything that moves. Basically, you're just trying to capture the essence of whatever it is that you're drawing, and also discover something. Discover what happens when you sketch quickly without judging it. We spend so much time judging ourselves. Am I doing the right thing? Is this good? Forget about all that. So we're going to start by warming up with, this says a 5-second drawing, but let's do 3 5-second drawings. Can be the same thing or different things. Then we're going to repeat that process with 10 seconds and then 15 seconds, and do the 3 drawings, 5-second drawings on the same page, and then get a different page for the 10s. And if you would, label each one with how long it took to create, and then we can compare those and see what the differences were between the different allotted times and how much information you were able to capture in 5, 10, and 15 seconds. All right, I'm going to stop screen sharing.
Mm-hmm.
I'm ready.
Mm-hmm.
Ready? Go. Stop.
Wow, okay. Who is stressed out about this? Linda, what did you get?
Well, this time I decided to do this. So I got a circle. I mean, essentially, because by the time you sort of tried to, because I was trying to be accurate with the shape of the circle, I suppose, rather than worrying about the vein on the inside, which would have been probably the more interesting place to start.
Okay, cool. All right, well, let's do it. Let's try a 10-second one and see what we get.
Right, let us know when to start.
Okay, ready?
Mm-hmm.
Go.
Now, you don't have to do the same contour sort of thing.
Stop.
Yeah, so I forgot to say this, but remember how in the blind contour where we were drawing like around the whole thing, you can basically go all over. And if that helps you draw faster, that's okay. So like Linda, you might start the outside of your circle and only get partway around and realize you're going to run out of time and then go inside and do some of that vein again.
Get detail, yeah.
Okay,
which this time
again.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And one more. So is 10 seconds feeling like a lot more time than 5?
Yeah.
I think part of that,
almost twice as much.
yeah, well, but part of it I think is also the fact that, you know, when you the first time you do this and it's 5 seconds, it's kind of a freak out.
Yeah.
And then the second time you do it, you feel more comfortable with what you're doing.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay, let's do 15. It's going to seem like an eternity.
Am I supposed to stay on the same page? Is that what you were?
What I'm doing is I did 3 5-second drawings on one page, 3 10-second drawings on one page, and 3 15-second drawings on do them on a separate page. But if you're drawing really small and they'll fit on a single page, you can do that. I tend to draw kind of large. I tend to draw to fill whatever the space of whatever page I'm on is. So I didn't have room to put them all on one sheet.
Yeah, sure.
And if you're going fast, it also helps to hold your pencil like this, because you'll have more arm motion.
Okay.
Than if you're, resting your hand and trying to draw. That also helps you draw a little bit larger. And that'll be a little more expressive.
Yeah, got it. Thank you.
Okay, so we're ready to go?
Mm-hmm.
Ready?
Okay, 15 seconds, go. Time up. Oh, that's nice. Are we gonna do another one?
Yeah, let's do one more.
Okay, one more 15 seconds. Ready?
One more 15. Yep.
Go. And time's up.
Okay, cool. So one thing that happens with this is that's my 15-second of my pine cone. And I started to actually get a little bit more of the feel of a pine cone versus, what happened in some of the other drawings. And so this kind of sketch, we're going to prepare for the next step, which is to do a more long-term drawing. If you did what we just did, say with a 10 or 15 minute sketch or second sketch, and you did it with a very light line, then when you get ready to spend more time delineating the detail, you've got kind of a blueprint already that you can draw over. And so this can be sort of I would call it underdrawing. Like if you you're trying to orient yourself on the paper and where you're going to be at, you could start out with something like this that's fast and then go back over it and spend more time with some of the detail. Okay, I'm going to share my screen again, and we're going to go to the next little exercise. Whoops, sorry. Okay, so I've got 15 minutes on this, and Valerie, do we have 15 minutes or no?
I think people are probably going to drop off, so you might as well finish it up since we're not going to be able to wrap it up.
Okay, so everybody, if you don't want to stay on here and do this, I'll go through what it is, and maybe you want to practice this. You could screenshot this if you want, or practice it on your own. But the next thing we were going to do was to take our same subject and spend 15 minutes with it. And what we're going to practice here is you're going to make a more finished, quote unquote, drawing. You're going to be able, because you have more time, to capture more detail. And the part of what's good about this is you're practicing that careful observation that we were talking about and trying to work more towards accuracy. And as I just mentioned, you can use the previous technique to capture the essence of what you're drawing with a light sketch, and then go back and kind of fill those details in over it. And because you've got more time, it's always good to think about the composition on the page and making that an aesthetic arrangement if you're into the whole aesthetic thing. And there's nothing to say that you have to care about that, because I know when I'm like Mike Zuma's field journal, I didn't have time to care about that. It was basically all about getting as much information down as I could, so that, you know, it was only down there for a week or two, and I knew I'd be a long time before I could go back. So I wanted to get as much information as I could. And the practice part of it is using light pencil strokes to kind of plan out the location of things. So like if, you know, you were drawing this pine cone, you might just kind of roughly sketch out the space it was going to take up on your paper. There is a sort of center rib to this, which has a slight curve in it, and you could draw a line to kind of indicate where that's at. And if you wanted to, you could make some just simple lines that would help you orient where the unfolding of these different pieces goes, so that when you try to detail them, you've got sort of a roadmap for yourself about that. Think about what you're seeing before you start it, and don't shade anything in yet, because every time I teach a class, a drawing class, people they want to shade it in. They think, you know, I didn't do a very good drawing, and if I shade it in, it'll look better. And what happens is you just get a drawing that didn't quite work to begin with, that's shaded in. And so, you know, learn how to draw first to whatever level you want to learn, and then you can shade things in later. You can also make some really beautiful work by not drawing every single detail. I might take this pine cone, which is super complicated, and do one of those expressive drawings where I'm not really looking at it like we did in the first exercise. And then I might pick one little spot, say, you know, the end of one of these pieces that opens up and lets the seed drop out, or, you know, or just a few of these. And I might sit and detail that so that it's sort of really, you know, accurate and hyper realistic. And that makes a beautiful contrast to the rest of what you've done. And it's a lot more interesting, I think, than drawing every single detail in, which doesn't let the viewer play along with your game. So when you don't finish something, the viewer's mind fills in the blanks. And if you take this and you draw every single thing on it, they're just going to look at it and be like, oh yeah, okay, it's a pine cone. So play some mind games with the people you might be, you know, who might look at your work by getting them to fill in the blanks for things that you didn't draw. And to end up, you can, if you want to do more of this, you can go to a couple of these websites, johnmuirlaws.com. Just go there and look at all the riches he's posted for you. There's all kinds of videos that are free. It's got lots and lots of tutorial type things if you want to get deeper into this practice. He goes way deeper into it than I could today. Also, natureartjournal.blogspot.com is a good place to go to find out more. And that prompt that I mentioned from Patty Peters or Paula Peters is at paperbarkwriter.com. And oddly enough, she's from Australia, so I'm guessing paperbark writer is from the Melaleuca tree. But I'm just guessing because I grew up in Miami and everybody had those in our, we had 2 in our yard. It was fairly common back then to have it in your yard. And I used to draw on that bark. Paperbarkwriter.com. All right, well, thanks everybody. Larry and I are glad you came and attended this, and hopefully had some fun and did some cool journaling stuff.
Thank you so much, Marjorie. This is great. I'm taking my time to try and draw this pinecone now. So,
okay.
Thanks, Marjorie. Do you guys want to like stay on and draw, or do you want to peace out?
Is there anybody still on that's drawing? Any questions?
We still have 35 people on.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, let's take some questions in that case. That would be great.
Yeah, how about we take some questions and we can draw intermittently.
Okay.
No questions so far, but lots of thank yous. Thank you from Amy Morey, Janice Smith. She says it's very inspiring. Amy says she's still drawing, so I mean, we can stay on if people want to stay on. Music Sports Fan 23, whoever that is, says this has been enjoyable and very encouraging. Within all caps, thank you. And Bonnie Kareem is here. Bonnie's very nice. So yeah, guys, we'll stay on and put any questions for Marjorie in the chat. She did say that she didn't get to talk too much about color.
Oh yeah, so does anybody have questions about color at all? Or is anybody interested? Let me, I'm gonna get up for a second and I'm gonna grab that book on color. I wanna hold that up to the screen if anybody's interested in that. Well, that's highly embarrassing because now I can't find it. Sorry about that. Unfortunately, I have about 4,000 books in there and I haven't been able to find it. Let me see if I can put the name of it in the chat.
When you're working with color, are you know, what I mean, you personally, do you go for sort of realistic colors? Are you are presumably looking to capture the light through the color and, you know, those sorts of elements as well? Or is it to get some kind of accurate color representation of what you've seen out in the field?
It sort of depends on what I'm doing. If I'm doing something like, I'll hold this up. So this is an example of something where, whoops, sorry.
Oh, wow, yeah.
Yeah, so this is something where I wanted this to be color accurate. So I spent a lot of time trying to make sure that it looked as much like what I was looking at as possible. And of course, I didn't finish both sides of it because I don't really need to. It's, you know, things are, what's bilateral symmetry.
Yeah.
So another one is a botanical thing. So this is Asimina tetramera. And this, I think this was less successful. The flowers, pretty successful in terms of color. But after having spent a lot of time with this plant, I think that greens are difficult. And I think that this may not be exactly the right green for that plant's leaves. It's a little too green and not enough yellow green. So if I'm doing something like that where I really want to capture that level of information, then yeah, I'll spend a lot of time trying to figure out the exact color. And then there are other things I do where they're just more dashed off and they're more about effect. I'd have to go grab another sketchbook from the other room to show you that, but I'll do that because there's different styles for different reasons.
So we have a question. Ann Johnson set her alarm for 1 p.m. So yes, all of our lunch and learns are recorded. Some of them are for members only, which means you won't be able to see them if you just go to our YouTube channel. And some of them are public, which means you can browse them easily on our YouTube channel just by searching Florida Native Plant Society on YouTube or Googling Florida Native Plant Society YouTube. And so this particular one is members only, so that means you can save the video just within YouTube or just save the link as a bookmark or in a document or a Google Keep note or something, and then just start the video from the beginning, and that's how you rewatch it.
So Werner's Nomenclature of Colors is the book, and that's a facsimile. And you can get it on Amazon. It's really kind of interesting. And the history of it is super interesting. I mean, I hate to hold my phone up. I don't know that this is useful, but so the full title is Werner's Nomenclature of Colors Applied to Zoology, Botany, Chemistry, Mineralogy, Anatomy, and the Arts. And basically it's a book like that systematically goes through and shows color palettes and names them so that people in different fields can share information about color. Not going to show all these sketchbooks, but there's one in particular I'm looking for.
Well, it's lovely to see your sketches. I mean, it is, a real treat to get to see some of your work. So
yeah, so this is not exactly a botanical thing, but a lot of the time when I'm traveling, I'll do sort of travel journals. And that's got like really light sort of pencil, but then the colors on this are not exactly the colors I was seeing. The sky wasn't that blue, but what I'm going for in some of these is a more dramatic kind of a look to it.
Right.
And so it's really up to you what you want to try to express about the place that you're looking at. So here's another one. This is an Everglades sketchbook. And I was out at Mahogany Hammock and basically just trying to get down what it felt like to be there more than what it really looked like. So to me, this is what that day felt like. And that's a watercolor. So that's not very, specific about what the actual plants look like, but that's what it felt like. This is another one from Mahogany Hammock. And so I was looking at this sawgrass and kind of wet prairie environment. And it wasn't this yellow, but I wanted to accentuate that as the primary thing that I was looking at. So I made that yellow a lot darker than it actually was. So it would draw your eye to that particular spot. And then there's also notes out around the edge of this about what else was there. So what was in the hammock, I saw paraphyton in the water, which I always like to see. It's cool. And Gambosia, the little fish, were there. And so I just made some notes on that about, what else was around while I was looking at that. And then a botanical example, gumbo limbo bark in Mahogany Hammock. So this was done with me and about 100 bazillion mosquitoes. Because I used to go every summer, I would go back before the hurricane blew the little cottages away down at Flamingo. I would rent a cottage for a week in the summer.
I love Flamingo. It's great.
Go down there, and then, you know, every time you went into your cottage, you spent the first hour swatting mosquitoes. But it was a lot of fun to go down there and paint.
We do have some questions. Would you like to take them, Marjorie?
Sure.
Okay. Let's start with, what kind of colored pencils do you recommend? All
right. I have two kinds. And the first kind that I got in college, and there are these Eagle Very Thins. I don't even know if they make this pencil anymore. So there's the major difference with color pencils is the hardness of it and the amount of color that you can put down. And so my recommendation is always Barrel Prismacolor. And one reason why is because you can buy a set. They have different size sets, and they have all kinds of different sets for different things. Or you can just go to, say, Michael's or one of those kind of stores, and you can buy just what you want. So if you only want to buy, 5 different color pencils, you can buy just the 5 you want, or you can do what I did and, buy every single green they make, because I like lots of options. So that's my recommendation for color pencils, and I'll put it in the chat. They also have a line of them that are light fast. So if you're making artwork that you want to last a long time, then that's something you might want to think about. They're made, to not fade out over time. Of course, none of this wants to be in direct sunlight. But Prismacolor, I think, has more pigment in it than some of the others, and they're a little bit softer feel, and so you can get more saturated color on the page than with some of the other pencils.
Where do you still sell artwork? What's your sort of, professionally, where's your art or your drawings ending up anywhere, or?
Well, what I'm doing right now is I do a lot of work for environmental nonprofits, and I do a lot of work designing and writing and producing interpretive signage. And so I'm not really making work to sell specifically, but I make work that gets incorporated into those projects. So for example, I'm about halfway through a project with Martin County and an eco artist, Lucy Kirsch of ours, who's also an FNPS member. She's in the Palm Beach chapter. And it's a stormwater park project, a 4-parcel stormwater park project that cleans water from Old Palm City before it goes into the St. Lucie River. Mm-hmm. And so now all those drawings were done digitally. So none of that was on the board. The one I've got on the board right now is for Pan's Garden down in Palm Beach, and that is going to have botanical illustrations on it, and they're going to be watercolored. So that one's going to be 100% done by hand. And then, we'll have to scan everything and then assemble it in Photoshop. So mostly that's what I'm doing now as far as, I still do personal work, but I'm not really, it's just difficult to sell work. I used to do art fairs, and I don't know, they were fun. In fact, I scared my parents when I was a teenager because I told them I was going to join a caravan of artists that went around the country in campers. And that there was an immediate no. You're not going to join a caravan that goes around the country selling art. But I did sell art at art fairs for many years, and had fun doing it. And it was actually pretty profitable. And back when I was doing that, I painted life-size birds. And then that airplane thing on the wall back there, it's a graphite drawing of mine. Later on, I started doing work like that. Large format, sort of I don't know, realistic elements, but more imaginative kinds of spaces. It's hard to describe. And I did that for a while and trotted those around to shows. And then after that, I, had to get a real job. And I didn't really have time to make that work anymore because it takes a really long time. And that's always the problem. It takes to do finished work like that. It takes a long time to, figure out what you're going to do, and then also just to physically produce it.
Yeah.
And then when you calculate the number of hours out versus, what you can sell it for, it's tough. It's a tough way to live. And so I pretty much just make work, and I got 2 of those flat files full of work. And I don't know what I'm going to do with it. That's one reason I started doing a lot of work in sketchbooks, because it was more fulfilling to me to, I just like to make it, and I don't really care too much about selling it.
Yeah.
So.
We do have a few more questions.
Okay.
Lucinda asks, when sketching a flower, do you start with petals to the fore or the ones to the back?
Oh boy. Well, what I generally do is I generally try to figure out what's the outside shape of the thing. Actually, what I usually do is figure out what space it takes up. So the first thing I would do with something like that, and I'm going to do a little sketch here and hold it up. So say that was my sketchbook, and I'm drawing my flower. I have to figure out, where do I want my flower to be on this page? So do I want it to fill the whole page up? Am I going to enlarge it? Or do I want it to be life size? And so for this discussion, I'm going to say I want it to be life size. And it has a stem, right? So what I would do then is I would kind of like, holding the pencil like this and very lightly. This is going to look really lame, so be prepared. Because I have nothing to look at. But I would sort of figure out what space is that going to take up on my paper. And once I got that down, then I would start looking at, if I want to be super accurate, I would sit there and count how many petals. I'd probably start with the center. If say it's a ray flower, like an aster, I would, indicate where the center's at. And then I would figure out how many petals there are on that flower. And then I would put some lines down. It's hard to see, I'm sorry, but put some lines down that kind of break that space up. And then I would start drawing the individual petals into that space. And I guess working from the front of the flower, the piece that's closest to you, back, is probably the way that I would approach doing that. If you're looking right on at something. You might have a different view. You might be drawing a side view or a back view, but generally I look for the overall shape of it, and then I draw the thing that's closest to me first, and then work back.
There's a couple of other questions as well.
Yes, Susan Early says, with colors, where do you start? Large versus small spaces, or dark versus light colors?
Well, if you're doing watercolor, so watercolor is going to be an additive process. So if you're using watercolors, you don't mix white in with it. The white is the paper. And so I would always start with, if I'm doing a kind of washy watercolor, I would start with the lightest color, because then you can build up over that. And it also dries lighter. So it might look perfect when it's wet, and then you let it dry and it's too light. And so you can kind of go back over that and bring the color level up a little bit. But it isn't a linear process from light to dark. So I would sort of put everything in up to a certain level, and then the very last thing I would do would be to add the darkest darks. And with watercolor, if you're going to paint the whole background, so you paint you're doing a flower, and you paint your flower, and then you want to put some background color on it. If the flower's still wet and you start to put the background color on, then that color all bleeds together. So you have to leave a little tiny space. or you'll have to just let part of it dry. So sometimes I'll work on more than one thing at a time. And I'll put that one thing aside and wait till it dries, and then I can go back and work into it. But generally, I would say I work from light to dark, because if you go too dark in the beginning, there's no way to, I mean, the only ways to fix it are to use an opaque color over it, like mix opaque white with it to lighten up other colors and paint over it. And then it's no longer watercolor. It's basically a gouache technique. Or you can, in some cases, if it's not too big an area, you can take like an X-Acto knife and like scrape off some pigment. But that's dependent on the kind of paper surface that you're on.
Thank you. And when do you teach your drawing classes?
Oh, I teach, well, it's a kind of random thing right now. So whenever somebody wants me to teach it, I've taught a session at Pan's Garden, taught it at actually a couple of conferences in the past for Native Plant Society. I've done it for chapters, a couple of the chapters. And when I do that, we usually pick a field spot and go out in the field and actually work outside. And I just taught one at the Environmental Learning Center in Wabasso, which is near Vero Beach. And I'm talking to them about teaching a group of classes, probably, 4 to 6 consecutive Saturdays. But we don't have that on a schedule yet. So it's pretty much whenever. I've also taught it at the Blake Library in Stewart. So basically whenever somebody has a venue, or we can set up a venue, I'm available to teach it.
And, we were talking about maybe doing a program this spring, maybe after hours, once a month, something about native plant art, watercolors.
Yeah, so if anybody's interested in, this is kind of an ongoing thing, Valerie and I had a conversation about that, because this is a lot to take on in one session. And, also COVID kind of interfered with teaching it in person. I was going to teach it to a Florida Master Naturalist class down in Stewart that was doing something with living shorelines. And we were going to use it to help them document their living shorelines project. But then COVID came along and I had to cancel that. So, basically it's whenever, wherever I have enough interest and people want to get involved in it.
Okay, that's it for questions.
All right, cool. Well, thanks everybody.
I finished doing my little longer picture. There we go. It does look, whoops, things like more like a pine cone.
It does look like a pine cone.
Oh, that's great. Linda, you have to post that.
I will.
Okay.
Oh, well, thank you so much for your time again. This was really fun. It's an amazing way to spend an afternoon. I definitely feel relaxed and definitely took on board the looking at the details part.
Yeah, and that's that's part of it, is like, don't get too wrapped up in the result and just have a good time with it.
Yeah, perfect.
All right, well, thanks everybody.
Thank you. Have a great weekend, Marjorie.
Okay, bye.
Thanks.